I still remember the knot of disappointment in my stomach when my mother, Carol, called to say my solo vacation was off. "Money's tight, Ellie," she'd sighed. A familiar refrain that had always meant my dreams were put on hold. But then, a few weeks later, babysitting in their brightly lit kitchen, my eyes landed on it, a thick envelope, half open, casually revealing a luxury cruise line logo. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled out the papers. A fully paid, week-long itinerary for them. My brother Michael, my sister Sarah, her whole family. This wasn't just a trip. It was a blatant betrayal. The lie, simmering for weeks, finally exploded into undeniable proof in my trembling hands. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. Eleanor, or Ellie as everyone called me, still remembered the knot of disappointment that twisted in my stomach when my mother, Carol, called to deliver the news my long-awaited solo vacation was off. "Money's tight, Ellie," she'd sighed, her voice laced with that familiar maternal weariness, a tone I'd grown to associate with my own desires being quietly shelved. That phrase, "money's tight," had always been a euphemism for my dreams taking a back seat, a quiet casualty in the grand scheme of family needs. This particular trip, a meticulously planned escape to Zion National Park, had been a year in the making. Every extra shift worked, every casual dinner invitation declined, all meticulously saved for. I'd envisioned myself sitting amidst the soaring red sandstone cliffs, absorbing the profound silence, a much-needed balm for a soul worn thin by years of relentless effort. But then, a few weeks later, the sting of that canceled trip was suddenly eclipsed by a far sharper pain. I was in my parents' brightly lit kitchen, helping out by babysitting Sarah's kids, a role I often filled when my eyes landed on it. A thick cream-colored envelope, carelessly left half open on the polished granite countertop. The logo, embossed in a shimmering gold foil, caught the light of fancy cruise line, the kind plastered across glossy magazine ads I'd idly flipped through while waiting at the dentist. A wave of unease rippled through me, a premonition I couldn't quite articulate. My fingers, almost unconsciously, reached for the papers inside. They felt substantial, crisp, utterly alien to the narrative of scarcity I'd been fed. It took a mere 3 seconds for my mind to process the bold print, the meticulously laid out itinerary, the names listed beside the cabin numbers, my parents, Carol and Robert, my brother, Michael, my sister, Sarah, her husband, even their 2 rambunctious children. A fully paid week-long cruise, scheduled for a time of year when they knew, with absolute certainty, I could never take time off from work. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My stomach dropped, my hands tightened around the papers until my knuckles turned white, and the frantic drumming of my heart echoed loud in my ears, drowning out the distant giggles of my nephews. This had to be a mistake, a cruel, nonsensical joke. They couldn't afford a vacation, not after they had sat me down, just 2 months ago, and delivered that somber speech about financial struggles. They'd told me Sarah was struggling with childcare costs, that Michael really needed a new car, painting a picture of a family teetering on the brink of financial strain. "It's just not responsible for any of us to take vacations right now," Mom had declared, shaking her head with an air of profound sacrifice. "We all have to make sacrifices, sweetheart." So, I'd sacrificed. My friends, though visibly disappointed, had understood. They'd gone without me. Their excited photos from the all-inclusive resort a constant, quiet hum of what I'd given up. Now, standing in their meticulously clean kitchen, holding irrefutable proof of their calculated deception, something inside me didn't just snap, it shattered. They hadn't just gone on vacation. They had gone without even telling me, without a single word of explanation, without a hint. No one had mentioned it, not once. Just that morning, Michael had texted me, asking if I could spot him $100 for car repairs, echoing the perennial state of his finances, a state perpetually managed by my parents' generous, unquestioning bailouts. Sarah, just yesterday, had casually asked if I was free for babysitting next weekend, a request that now felt like an insidious part of a larger unspoken conspiracy. Even Carol, my own mother, had called just the previous day, chatting about inconsequential things, her voice light and unburdened by any visible guilt. And yet, here it was, irrefutable evidence they were all leaving in 2 days for a luxury cruise, meticulously planned for the exact time of year I was bound to my work, physically unable to join. A chilling clarity settled over me as I stared at the dates on the tickets. This wasn't a coincidence. They hadn't simply forgotten to invite me. They had deliberately orchestrated it, chosen this precise window of time when my work commitments would naturally exclude me, just in case I somehow stumbled upon the truth and, God forbid, expressed a desire to join. The casual cruelty of it, the premeditation, was a deeper cut than the initial lie. I heard Carol's humming grow louder as she approached the kitchen. Her footsteps light, oblivious. I shoved the papers back into the envelope, my movement swift and mechanical, and stepped away from the counter just as she walked in, a beaming smile fixed on her face. "Oh, honey, thanks for watching him today," she chirped, her voice falsely sweet as she grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. "You're a lifesaver." I merely nodded, unable to trust my voice, unable to articulate the storm raging within me. She had no idea. No flicker of guilt crossed her features, no hint of hesitation in her eyes. I forced a smile, a brittle, fragile thing. "No problem," I managed, the words tasting like ash. She glanced at the clock, her eyes widening slightly. "Oh, I have to pick up a few things before dinner," she said, cutting herself off abruptly, as if she'd almost divulged some forbidden detail. I waited, holding my breath, but she merely cleared her throat and offered another forced smile before turning and leaving the room. I let her go, let her walk away without another word. The secret a heavy weight between us, unseen, yet acutely felt. I had learned early in life that in my family, fairness was a foreign concept, a luxury afforded to others, never to me. When I was a mere 6-year-old, my small heart had yearned for dance lessons, a dream whispered to my mother with wide, hopeful eyes. Carol had sighed, a long, drawn-out sound of maternal burden, and gently told me they were too expensive. "We just didn't have the money for that kind of thing." "Sweetie," she'd explained, her voice soft but firm. "I understood, or thought I did. I was a child, but I wasn't selfish. I dropped it, burying the tiny dancer inside me. A month later, Sarah, my older sister, began weekly private horseback riding lessons. Not a one-time thing, but a consistent, costly investment. My parents had called it an investment in her passion, never once acknowledging the glaring hypocrisy. They genuinely saw no problem, no disparity in their actions. This pattern, this insidious favoritism, continued throughout my entire life. My siblings, Michael and Sarah, always seemed to get what they wanted, their desires magically aligning with the family's available funds. I, on the other hand, received excuses, carefully crafted narratives of scarcity that only seemed to apply to my aspirations. When I was 12, aching for a new bike, Michael received a gleaming blue mountain bike, its thick tires promising adventures. When I timidly asked for one, my father, Robert, had handed me Michael's old one. The seat was torn, the handlebars wobbled precariously, and the brakes barely worked. "But it's still good," he'd said, his voice laced with a subtle guilt trip. "You don't want us to waste money, do you?" His words then had felt like a moral imperative, a test of my character. Now, they felt like a cynical manipulation. At 15, my class planned a transformative trip to Washington, D.C., a journey I desperately longed to take. I'd saved every penny, earned from endless babysitting gigs and odd jobs, even skipping school lunches to squirrel away extra cash, a week before the deposit was due. Carol had sat me down, her face etched with a familiar sorrow. "Honey, "We just can't afford it right now," she'd said, her eyes avoiding mine. "It's a lot of money, maybe next year." I'd nodded, swallowing the bitter pill of disappointment. For by then, I knew how things worked, how my desires were always shunted into a mythical next year that never arrived. A mere month later, Michael went on a ski trip with his friends, a luxurious excursion fully paid for by my parents. I'd asked about it once, just once, the words tentative, loaded with unspoken pain. Carol had offered me a tired smile, devoid of true empathy. "Sweetheart, it's different," she'd explained. "He really needed this. It's important for his social life, right?" The implied question, because yours wasn't, hung in the air, unspoken but acutely felt. I stopped asking after that. The silence became my armor, my resignation. By the time I entered college, I understood my unspoken role in the family. I was the responsible one, the independent one, the one who didn't need help. My sister and brother received handouts, lavish gifts, and constant financial interventions. I received lectures on the virtues of hard work, on pulling myself up by my bootstraps, on the importance of self-reliance. Sarah's wedding, a grand affair, was entirely bankrolled by my parents. The opulent venue, the gourmet catering, the designer dress, every extravagant detail. When I graduated college, they presented me with a congratulations card, a flimsy piece of cardstock, no money, no support, just polite, empty words. Michael, throughout his 20s, spiraled through a series of financial disasters, racking up credit card debt, losing jobs, making one disastrous decision after another. My parents, without fail, bailed him out every single time, their rescue efforts immediate and unquestioning. "You're doing fine on your own," Robert had told me once, his voice tinged with a strange pride, when I had dared to ask why they never helped me the way they helped Michael. "You don't need us the way he does." His words, meant to be reassuring, were a crushing dismissal. I did need them. I just never had the luxury of showing it. Never felt safe enough to admit vulnerability. By the time I started working full-time, a seemingly independent adult, my parents began to subtly, then overtly, rely on me for favors, babysitting, helping out with unexpected bills, chipping in for groceries, paying for things here and there, just to help out. It was always me giving, never getting, a constant, draining outflow of my time, energy, and resources. And then the vacations, that truly was the final straw. It had happened before, more than once, an insidious pattern I was only now truly grasping. Plans would be made, exciting trips discussed, grand ideas thrown around among the family, until it came time to actually book the tickets. Then, like clockwork, something would suddenly happen. Money would get tight. Someone, invariably Michael or Sarah, would need help. Sarah's kids would have school commitments, or Michael would have work obligations, or my parents would claim too many expenses that month. And just like that, the trip would cancel, or so I had thought. Now, staring at those glossy cruise tickets, the truth unfurled before me, cold and undeniable. They weren't canceling vacations, they were canceling my vacations. Every single time a trip included me, it would mysteriously fall apart, disintegrate into a pile of excuses and unmet expectations. But when it was just them, when my presence wasn't a factor, money was never an issue. The thought about all the times I'd sacrificed for them, the trips I'd missed, the friends I'd let down, the years of placing their needs above my own, washed over me in a suffocating wave. And then, the bitter realization of how they had gone behind my back, how they hadn't even told me, how they had meticulously planned this trip for a time when they knew I physically couldn't join, just in case I found out. I wasn't even worth a flimsy excuse this time. I was simply erased from the equation. That was when something fundamental within me shifted, solidified into a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront them. I didn't make a scene, didn't scream or cry or accuse. I just stopped. The first real test of my new resolve came 2 days later. Sarah called me, her voice edged with a familiar panic. "Hey, Ellie, can you watch the kids this weekend? Something came up at work, and I really need the shift." The old Ellie, the one who always said yes, who always rearranged her plans, who eagerly gave up her free time to make her sister's life easier, almost answered in the affirmative. But this new Ellie, silent and steely, spoke instead. I can't. Silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, across the phone line. What? Sarah's voice was laced with confusion. Disbelief. I can't, I repeated, my voice even, devoid of apology or explanation. I'm busy. I could almost hear her frown through the phone. But you never have plans on weekends, she blurted out. A comment that stung more than I expected. Not because it was rude, but because it underscored her implicit assumption of my constant availability. Not anymore. Sorry, I said, and hung up, the click of the phone a final, decisive sound. The text started an hour later, a flurry of increasingly frantic messages. Mom said you won't babysit? Are you okay? From Sarah, then from Carol. Ellie, just busy with what? I didn't respond. I let their uncertainty fester, a silent punishment. The next day, Michael called, his voice oozing casual charm. Hey, random favor, could you spot me like $100 just until payday? I almost laughed, a dry, humorless sound that caught in my throat. This was the same brother who had just returned from a luxury vacation I hadn't been invited to. The same brother my parents constantly bailed out while simultaneously telling me I was doing fine on my own. Sorry, I said, my voice mirroring Carol's previous pronouncement. Money's tight. Another silence, this one longer, more profound. Oh, really? He sounded genuinely caught off guard. I didn't think I'd ever turned him down before. Yeah, I said, a faint smile playing on my lips. We all have to make sacrifices, right? I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, struggling to comprehend this unfamiliar resistance. He mumbled something about figuring it out and hung up. It didn't take long for them to realize something was profoundly wrong. Carol called me that night, her voice overly sweet, saccharine to the point of nausea. Hey, honey, is everything okay? You've been a little distant. I leaned back against my couch, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange detachment. I'm fine, Mom. Just focusing on work. Oh, good, she said, a nervous pause punctuating her words. You know, we missed you this past week? I nearly choked. They missed me. The people who had gone out of their way to ensure I couldn't be there, who had woven a web of lies to exclude me. That's funny, I said, my voice light, casual, almost breezy. I didn't even know you were gone. Silence. I let it sit between us, heavy and sharp, a tangible accusation she had no idea I knew. Not truly. Anyway, I continued, my voice still light. Hope you had fun. I hung up before she could formulate another excuse, another manipulation. The cracks in their carefully constructed facade started forming fast. Sarah, unable to find a babysitter, began missing shifts at work. A couple of missed shifts turned into official warnings. Warnings escalated into fewer scheduled hours. And suddenly, her extra shifts weren't worth the exorbitant cost of childcare. Michael, whose finances had always been a disaster, a house of cards perpetually propped up by others, ran out of people to ask for help. The money I had loaned him in the past, never repaid, was gone. And now that I wasn't around, he had no safety net. He had always assumed our parents would bail him out if I wasn't there. But they, too, were beginning to drown. The truth was, they had always depended on me far more than they realized, more than they were willing to admit. I had never overtly given them large sums of money, but I had subtly, consistently, been their silent financial buffer. I had covered bills when they came up short, chipped in for groceries just because, paid for countless little things here and there that quietly added up. I had taken care of problems before they even became problems, patching up the gaping holes in their sinking ship, keeping it afloat with my quiet, tireless efforts. And now that I was gone, now that I had withdrawn my invisible support, the whole thing was sinking, and sinking fast. A week after I cut them off, Carol called my work phone. I let it go to voicemail. The message, when I listened to it later, was eerily calm, a practiced softness that barely masked the underlying desperation. Ellie, sweetheart, I know you're upset, but things are really difficult right now. Your sister is struggling, your brother is having a hard time. We just need a little help getting through this rough patch. Call me back. Okay. I didn't call back. The next day, another voicemail, this time. Her voice was more strained, the calmness cracking. Ellie, I don't understand what you're trying to prove. We're family. You're making things harder than they need to be. I know you don't want to see us suffer. I ignored it. Then the real panic started. A call from an unknown number, then another and another, finally. Exhausted by the relentless ringing, I answered, hello? A sharp breath on the other end. Then Sarah's voice, thin and reedy with desperation. Are you seriously going to let Mom and Dad lose the house? I blinked, the question hanging in the air, surreal and shocking. What? I managed, my voice flat. They're behind on their mortgage, she snapped, the desperation giving way to accusation. They were covering for me and Michael when we needed help, and now they're screwed. They're literally weeks away from losing everything. Ellie. Something inside me froze, then solidified. This was bigger than I had realized, far more catastrophic than I'd imagined their struggles to be. And yet, it was almost impressive in its irony. They had gone on a luxury vacation just months ago. Guilt tripped me into canceling my own trip to support the family. And now, suddenly, they were on the precipice of financial ruin, facing homelessness. What do you expect me to do? Sarah, I asked, my voice devoid of emotion, a mere echo of the flat tone they had used with me for years. Oh my God, Ellie, are you serious? Mom and Dad are going to be homeless. They need help. I let her words sink in, let them resonate with the bitter irony of my past. They needed help, just like I had needed help growing up, just like I had needed support when I put myself through college. Working multiple jobs, meticulously taking care of myself while they threw money at Sarah and Michael, constantly bailing them out. They had never been there for me. But now that their backs were against the wall, now I was supposed to save them. Ellie, Sarah tried again, her voice softer, laced with a plea. We're talking about Mom and Dad's house, the house we grew up in. You can't just... I cut her off, my words precise, unyielding. If I lost my job tomorrow, if I couldn't pay my rent, if I called and begged for help, would you take me in, Sarah? Silence, a long, cold, telling silence, heavier than any words could be. Ellie? She said, quieter now, her voice barely a whisper. That's not... It is the same, I stated, my voice firm, unwavering. And you know it. Another pause, then the anger. You're being so vindictive, she snapped, her desperation giving way to fury. We're supposed to be family. We were supposed to be family, I retorted, my voice calm, almost detached, when you all went on a vacation and left me behind. That's not the same thing, she screamed. Goodbye. Sarah. I hung up. And this time I felt nothing, no guilt, no second guessing, no lingering sorrow. They had made their choices. Now they were living with them. A few days later, Carol showed up at my apartment. I wasn't even surprised. I opened the door to find her standing there, her face pale, drawn, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen as if she'd been crying for hours. This time, she didn't even try to pretend, didn't attempt a forced smile or a casual pleasantry. Ellie, she whispered, her voice raw, broken. We have nowhere else to go. I let those words settle between us, heavy with the weight of her despair. She meant it. They had exhausted every option, burned through every lifeline. I was truly their last resort, and I knew, in that precise moment, that if I let them back in, if I helped them now, after everything, they would never stop. They would never change, and I would never truly be free. I inhaled slowly, deeply, gripping the doorframe, feeling the solid wood under my fingers, an anchor in the storm of their making. I'm sorry, I said, my voice soft but resolute. But I can't help you. Her lips trembled, a silent plea. Just please, if I was the one standing here? I continued softly, my voice laced with a quiet, undeniable truth. Would you let me in? Tears spilled freely down her cheeks, tracing paths through the dust of her desperation. You're our daughter, she sobbed, the words a last, desperate grasp at a bond she had so carelessly severed. I nodded, my gaze unwavering. And I was your daughter when you chose to leave me out. I took a single step back, a final, definitive movement, and gently, but firmly, shut the door. I stood there, on the other side of the closed door, listening, waiting. I heard her choked sobs, her pleas, muffled and indistinct, then, finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard her footsteps retreat, fading away down the hallway. I exhaled, a long, shaky breath, feeling an immense, suffocating weight lift from my chest, a burden I hadn't realized I was still carrying. It was over. The silence that followed was not empty, but full, vibrating with a profound, liberating peace.